The 90s, many would argue, I think, not the best decade for movies, although, you know, there is a case to be made that it does include one of the greatest, the single greatest years in film with 1999. But yeah, on the whole, I don't tend to hear many people raving about how great the 90s were for movies, but I do think there was quite a lot of movies from that period that are absolute classics. So, I'm going to bring you my top 100 movies of the 90s, but I'm not alone. Joining me in this endeavour is Jason Nike from Backtrack Cinema. He is also doing a top 100 movies of the 90s, and he will be dropping his video on his channel either just before this one or just after this one. Either way, we're dropping them on the same day, around the same time. So once you've checked out mine, go and check out his. Also, do give this video a thumbs up along with Jason's video, because if we reach 300 likes each and 15,000 views, I think it was we agreed on. If we get 15,000 views on each of our videos and 300 likes, we will be doing another top 100. I'm not sure we've set it in stone yet, but it might be top 100 movies of the 80s or something like that. But yeah, if you like this one enough, we'll bring you more. You know how these things work. I start with, I'm going to say least favourite, because there isn't a bad film on this list, obviously, and work my way to the best, what I think is the best film of the 90s. At number 100 is The Rock, the Michael Bay action classic. This is probably my favourite Michael Bay film, or it's at least in contention for favourite, along with 13 Hours. I think 13 Hours takes a more serious approach at the kind of war type movie for Michael Bay at any rate. It's probably his most serious film, but yeah, The Rock is just good old fashioned kind of one-liners, cool characters, blow as much stuff up as possible. It's fun. It's a heap of fun. And I've also seen some very interesting videos on The Rock that allude to the possibility that Sean Connery is actually playing his version of James Bond in the film, and that this is, yeah, later on in his life when he's been caught, he's been imprisoned, he's kind of undercover. There's things in the film that kind of suggest it may be James Bond that we're dealing with here, which I find interesting. You can take that with a pinch of salt, but I find it interesting, and watching the film through that lens does add a new dynamic to it. But either way, it's just a really great action film. 99 is Shallow Grave. This is the cinematic debut of Danny Boyle. This was at a time when really the only British big name directors that were out there were kind of like Mike Leigh and Ken Loach. That was kind of it, really. I'm sure many fervent defenders of British cinema would throw a heap of names at me that I probably wouldn't have the first clue who they were. But as a young boy, yeah, I'd heard of Ken Loach, I'd heard of Mike Leigh, and that was about it. And then Danny Boyle gate crashed the scene with this film, which is just an awesome little thriller. It looks a little bit made for TV at times, but that's primarily, I think, because of the budget. But it introduced us to the likes of Ewan McGregor and Christopher Eccleston in what is just, yeah, like I say, a top-notch thriller that goes to some real dark places and has a little bit of fun with it too. It's got a kind of a dry sense of humour about it in a, yeah, very twisted kind of way, which is right up my street. Number 98 is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, one of the two comedies of the 90s that I used to just watch ad nauseum for the longest of times. A lot of jokes in there that wouldn't wash today with modern sensibilities, and if anything, that kind of makes me like it all the more. Number 97 is American History X, a film that was all but disowned by director Tony Kaye, who literally wanted his name taken off it. I can't remember what the deal was around that with regards to why he couldn't. I think it was because he'd been outspoken about the project. I think if you take your name off as director and you put like Alan Smithy on, I think one of the conditions of that is that you're not allowed to go and badmouth the film while it's being promoted and stuff. So yeah, because he did do that, he wasn't allowed to get his name taken off. But he pretty much swears that Edward Norton took over, and that it's not the film that he wanted to make. Irrespective of that, it looks like Edward Norton's a good director, because it's a pretty damn good film. Yeah, just a very good film about racism, about its effects, about the evils of it and how it grips you, the ways in which it grips you, and the damaging, horrible kind of effects of it. It's just, yeah, really gripping film, with a scene that even now when I think about it makes me clench my teeth. Number 96 is The Paper, directed by Ron Howard and starring Michael Keaton. This is what I would call Sorkin light, but given that Sorkin is one of my favourite writers of all time, that's not a diss, it's kind of actually a compliment. Yeah, this is something I could very much imagine having been written by Sorkin on one of his lesser days, but by anybody else's standards, that's still a pretty damn good day. So yeah, it's a very good film, comedy / drama, set in the world of a newspaper and those that have to bring it to print. And it's just, yeah, it's gripping in the way that a good drama should be. It's got characters that I really enjoy following, that are well-rounded, and it's quite amusing in parts. It's not laugh out loud funny, because it's not that kind of comedy, but it's just, yeah, it's a good, light kind of drama that has quite a few things to say about the corporate world. Number 95 is True Crime, directed by Clint Eastwood and also starring Clint Eastwood. This follows a drunken kind of bum of a man, a reporter, again played by Eastwood, who has to kind of decide whether or not to really pursue this story of this man who is on death row, and his innocence. You know, it could very well be that this man is innocent and he's about to go and meet his maker, and it's in the hands of this drunken bum who's kind of losing his family. He's not very good with his kids. There's actually one really amusing part in the film involving that, to be honest. But yeah, it's just a good character study of this man, and a kind of race against time. You know, will he, won't he? And there are times there towards the end where you genuinely don't know which way it's going to go. At least that's how it was for me at any rate. Yeah, Clint Eastwood on really great form as director and really great form as an actor. If you're an Eastwood fan, it's a must-watch, for me at any rate. Number 94 is Blade. This is really the film that put Marvel on the map. You know, Marvel Studios didn't really exist at that point. They had to get their films funded and made through other corporations. But this is really the film that brought the comic book movie back from the brink. You know, it wasn't until, like, we had Batman, obviously, and then we had The Crow, which are two, you know, absolute classics. But after that, it was just dead in the water after, you know, the likes of Batman and Robin just literally killing the very idea of a comic book movie franchise. And then Blade hit the scene, R-rated, didn't hold back. First time we had a black lead superhero on screen. It was a serious movie. It was to be taken seriously. It's a horror. It's all great stuff. Really great action film, and that's it. You know, afterwards we got Spider-Man, which a lot of people kind of credit, you know, and X-Men and Spider-Man, people credit as bringing the superhero genre back from the brink. But really, it was Blade. Started with Blade, and for good reason. At number 93 is True Lies. This is far from being my favourite James Cameron film, but again, a little bit like the whole Aaron Sorkin on a bad day thing. It's still better than most people's good day. This is James Cameron almost, I would say, dare I say, slumming it. He's out to make just a bit of fun, you know. Normally, he's a very serious filmmaker. He makes films that are quite weighty and whatnot. And here it's just, yeah, he just wants us to go on a Friday night to the cinema with our popcorn and have a good time. And he makes a really great action movie in order to allow us to do that. It's a spy film. It's Schwarzenegger on form, Jamie Lee Curtis on form. Really great action set pieces, family drama at the heart of it all, about husband and wife trying to sort their marriage out, all whilst things are blowing up behind them and things like that. Yeah, it's a really great action film that's also actually genuinely funny. Number 92 is the second of the two comedies I was talking about that I watched ad nauseum during the 90s, and that is Dumb and Dumber. It's great. Chemistry between the two leads, Carey, Jeff Daniels. It's very rare kind of chemistry that you'd get between two actors like that, and it's gold. Number 91 is Total Recall, Paul Verhoeven's version of Total Recall, another Schwarzenegger classic, one of Schwarzenegger's best films, in fact. Some excellent practical effects work, a really good story that makes you question reality. If you're not really you and you're like some created version of you, who would you be and what would the world look like? And would that constitute reality, or would you need to get out of that and escape back to reality? And it's all those questions are being asked whilst, again, things are blowing up, people are being hit, and foxy women are having scraps with each other. Number 90 is Back to the Future Part 3. This is one of those rare instances where the third part of a trilogy is just as good as what came before. I mean, it's certainly better than the second part, put it that way. And I think it hinges on how much you like Westerns, though. I think most people would argue the case that either the first film or the third film is the best, I would say. I think I tend to veer more towards the third film just because I do like a good Western, and I like that this one throws our heroes into the Western kind of era and then plays with that genre. It takes all the tropes of the Western and tweaks them, uses them. And number 89 is Interview with the Vampire, a film that gets quite a divided reaction from what I've seen. You know, I talked about this film when we did our Vampires versus Werewolves 31 on 31. And it seemed to fall into two camps of people. Those who loved it and accepted it as a gothic horror kind of vampire film, and those that just thought, it's a bit too gay for me. So a lot of people kind of come at it from. I must be in the not too gay camp because I really like this film. I think that the story between these men, these vampire beings, and their kind of journey through the ages, where they kind of need each other but they hate each other at the same time. It's this kind of codependent relationship. And then you throw in the mix this eternal child, played by Kirsten Dunst, who's like their surrogate daughter. And it makes for some very interesting and at times creepy kind of commentary on man's place in the world. Made from a book by a woman who was really kind of going through the loss of a child herself. And she was like dealing with all this stuff in the form of this story that she wrote, in Interview with a Vampire. And that all comes through here. You know, the questions of, do we live in a godless world? And if so, what does that mean for mortality, immortality, our souls, this, that and the other. It's all wrapped up in this, rather gothic horror tale of these vampires just trying to survive through the centuries. Number 88 is Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, directed by Henry Selick. Yes, Burton gets pretty much most of the credit, and I understand, where that comes from. It's his story, it's his characters, he produced it as well. But yeah, Henry Selick is the master behind the director's chair, or sitting in the director's chair. He'd go on to prove just how capable he is in this arena with the likes of Coraline. But yeah, it's a beautifully crafted stop motion animation film with really wonderful characters. It gets a little bit, like, I would say, dreary at times. It's one of those films that the more I've watched it, there are certain sections in it where I'm like, I just want to get through that section now and get to this bit that I know I like and that bit that I know I like, just because the overall palette of it is quite dreary. But the creativity that is on display is undeniable. Number 87 is The Virgin Suicides, the debut film from director Sofia Coppola. She famously lambasted for her performance in The Godfather Part 3, but it turns out she was never meant to be an actor. She was always meant to be a director. This is a really good low-key drama from the 90s that is actually quite dark. I mean, the title does suggest that darkness. It's about suicide. But yeah, I watched this. I didn't watch this when it first came out. I watched it after the fact. And I actually watched it after a friend of mine had committed suicide. And this film did a really good job of just encapsulating the pointlessness of it all, the waste of it all, and that just gut-wrenching feeling that somebody got to that point where they felt there was no other way out. I've seen this a few times, and each time when I get to that ending, it hits me like a gut punch. Number 86 is one of the most underrated horror movies of all time by one of the most underrated directors of all time, and that is The Relic. Directed by Peter Hyams, who is a man who very talented, got to be said, because he doesn't just direct. A lot of his films, he shoots them as well. He's the cinematographer. I don't know if he was on this one, but a lot of his films, he's also the cinematographer. He's also the editor. He's one of those jack-of-all-trades guys who has made, actually, quite a few low-key classics. Films like Outland, 2010, which is one of them sequels that is much better than it has any right to be. And this film, also End of Days, which is a really great Schwarzenegger vehicle. So, yeah, really underrated director, and this is a really underrated horror movie. If you've not seen The Relic, check it out. Set in a museum, which is a perfect location for a horror movie, it's got to be said. It's really eerie, it's got some great atmosphere, and the monster, which has been designed by Stan Winston, is a really great monster. Number 85 is another Ron Howard film. This one stars Mel Gibson, and it is Ransom. That's right, a man has his kids taken, and he just goes and puts a ransom out. Yeah, rather than paying the ransom to the kidnappers, he offers it up to anyone who can help him find the kidnappers, which, back then when I watched it, ballsy move. Now, as a parent, an even ballsier move, I would say. Number 84 is A Room for Romeo Brass. This is directed by one of my favourite British directors. This was released in 1999. Second film from director Shane Meadows, and an absolute tour de force performance from Paddy Considine, who is a newcomer at this point. The film is really amusing. The first half of it, it's just this kind of funny, British, quirky little dramedy, and then halfway through takes a really dark turn when one of the characters, does an about face, turns out he's not quite who he appears to be, and everything just goes really dark. And I won't say any more than that, but if you've not seen A Room for Romeo Brass, and you've probably never even heard of it, I would imagine, check it out. Great British cinema. Came out in 1999. When people talk about all the great movies that were released in 1999 and what a great year that was, this film is rarely mentioned, and it should be, because it's absolute peak British cinema of the decade, got to be said. Number 83 is Eyes Wide Shut. This was director Stanley Kubrick's last film, which is really sad, obviously. It would pair husband and wife, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, together. It took ages to shoot. Like this literally had more shooting days than Apocalypse Now, which is insane. Absolutely insane. But yeah, Kubrick was just mental on this with regards to what he was going for, and making sure he had the exact takes that he wanted, because they just shot and shot and shot and replayed and replayed and replayed. But yeah, I didn't like this film when I first saw it. In fact, I gave it a 2-star review when I first saw this way back when. But it's one of those films that the more I've watched it over the years, it has really grown on me. There's an obvious section that I don't need to talk about within the film that really turns me off, but that's literally like a 30-second moment in a 2.5-hour film. It's not about that, it's not about that section. It's about everything else that's going on. It's about husband and wife falling apart and the very little minutiae details as to why that happens and how do you get back from that. It's a film about lust. It's a film about what Jesus says, really, about, if you look at another woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Take that into a marriage, examine it, and that's what Kubrick does. Now, whether he was going for any kind of biblical commentary is neither here nor there. It's there. Number 82 is Groundhog Day. Again, just a really great drama/comedy with really well-rounded characters, a great central performance by Bill Murray on his A game, and just a really tight script. Number 81, The Game. This is, I would say, it's touted often as the most underrated of David Fincher films. I think it requires a lot of suspension of disbelief, but if you have that suspension of disbelief, then you will get many rewards from this film, I'd say. The central character, played by Michael Douglas, this man who's quite a pitiful man. It's essentially a modern day retelling of Scrooge, but without the Christmas setting. You take this man he's a rich Scroogey type guy, you send him on a journey that by the time you get to the end of the film changes his whole worldview. Done in a David Fincher style. think A Christmas Carol by David Fincher, and that's kind of what you get. Number 80 is Frankie and Johnny. This is a romantic comedy starring Michelle Pfeiffer, my favourite actress of the 90s, and Al Pacino, quite possibly my favourite actor of the 90s. It's a lot more serious than you might think. It's a dramedy, it's a comedy drama, but it's like a romantic comedy drama. But the characters feel real to me. So this is directed by Gary Marshall, who's, his biggest success was Pretty Woman. But for me, this is a much better film than Pretty Woman. It feels a lot more real to me. The characters are a lot more believable. The situations are a lot more believable. And I just think that the chemistry between Pacino and Pfeiffer is phenomenal. Number 79, Amistad. This is the film that I've not seen a right lot, it's got to be said, maybe only twice. But it's one of those that was so impactful that it just stays with you. It's a film you don't really need to see again because it's burnt into the brain. It's a Steven Spielberg film, but it's one that doesn't really often get talked about and does deserve more talk. When it comes to the conversation about Spielberg and the films he's made, what's top tier Spielberg, this is one that, low-key, under the radar, not a lot of people talk about, but deserves much more attention. It's about the fight against slavery, against the slave trade, and we see it from the courtroom side of things, and we see it, from the perspective of the slaves as well, on board the ships and the stuff they went through. And some of that stuff, as shown by Spielberg in this film, is just absolutely heartbreaking. One particular scene that, as I say, just remained burned in my brain forevermore. It's a really great courtroom drama with actors all on their A game. Hopkins, McConaughey, Hyun-soo, I can never pronounce his name, dude from Gladiator. But I think this was his first film, actually. He was found by Spielberg for this, and Jimin Hyun-soo? I don't know. Number 78 is Die Hard with a Vengeance, a movie that is, one, a sequel, but two, almost as good as the original, if it wasn't for the bungled ending. The ending of the film, I think, is a bit weak. It's kind of anticlimactic, which is a shame because everything else up to that point is on a par with the original. Completely different, like the first one, they're stuck in a location, whereas this one says, actually, we're going to circumvent that and we're going to force McClane to have to go to any number of locations around the city. The pairing of Bruce Willis with Samuel L. Jackson also is gold. You know, it's that thing that if you get it right, if you pair the right two actors together, then it makes the film a hell of a lot more watchable. And this is definitely one of those cases. The zingers between the two of them, it's just gold. Number 77 is Titanic, another film by director James Cameron. This one would go on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. It was fraught with all manner of production difficulties, many publications talking about how it was already dead in the water, it was going hugely over budget, this film is one of the most epic failures that's ever going to be brought to cinemas, and then it smashed the box office. Absolutely smashed the box office. I remember going to see this with my whole family. All 5 of us sat in a line. Very rare we all went to the cinema together to see something. But yeah, I think that was one of the last times, if not the last time, we all went to the cinema. Me, my mum, my dad and my 2 brothers. Yeah, and it was just a great experience. Is it a bit schmaltzy? Yeah. But I think that's what Cameron does well. He takes that into a lot of his movies. Even Terminator 2 has its fair share of schmaltz. Number 76 is the second entry by Danny Boyle, and it is Trainspotting. Yeah, this is a film that just was a freight train when it came out. You couldn't look anywhere without seeing something to do with Trainspotting. I believe in America they had to have it subtitled because the Americans couldn't quite understand the Scottish dialect, but whatever. Over here it was a really big deal, and the fact that a Scottish film was making such a big impact, I think it gave the Scots something to actually rally behind, because let's face it, cinema isn't exactly synonymous with Scottish classics. Certainly not up at this point anyway, when Trainspotting came out. And yeah, it fires on all cylinders. Great characters, great story. It's not afraid to go to dark places. It's not afraid to say and do things that, you don't necessarily want to watch it in front of your mother or anything like that. As I say, it's dark, but it's comedic. And if you get to the end of it and still want to take drugs, then what the hell is wrong with you? Number 75 is Gattaca. This is the directorial debut of Andrew Niccol, who wrote The Truman Show. This is a really great low-key sci-fi film. When I say low-key sci-fi, it's not spaceships and, technology out the bazinga. It's very low-key. We live in a futuristic world, but it doesn't do a right lot to indicate that. A few tweaks here and there. It's mostly about the concepts, and that concept is that we use genetics to make perfect children. If there are genes in there we don't like, we get rid of them, and we make sure the child being born is scientifically created perfect. And this follows the story of someone who was born naturally and therefore isn't perfect, and his struggle to compete in a world where someone like him is looked down upon. It's a really great drama. Uma Thurman is top-notch in it. Ethan Hawke is top-notch in it. And Jude Law is top-notch in it. It's just an all-round great drama with sci-fi trappings and something very important to say about humanity, what it is to be human. Number 74 is The Age of Innocence. This is a Martin Scorsese period drama, and it kind of makes me wish he would do more of them because, well, as you can tell, it's top-notch. I have reviewed this film on my channel, but yeah, again, Michelle Pfeiffer, Daniel Day-Lewis, who is, Daniel Day-Lewis, never puts in a bad performance. It's just greatly acted and it's greatly written. It's very subtle, very nuanced, and a lot of the meaning that is derived from it comes from the subtle looks and the subtle ways that people move, or just something that is said, and more to the point, the way that it's said. And it just, it brings you into this world that is ruled by class, and where class structure is everything. When somebody falls from a position of class to a lower position, how does that affect them and their world and everyone around them and everyone that comes into contact with them? It's just, it's a really great study of that, just brilliantly shot by Scorsese. And number 73 is The Last Boy Scout. This is written by Shane Black, one of my favourite writers, and directed by Tony Scott. It has all the visual bombast that you would expect from a Tony Scott film. He's very stylised, he likes to blow things up, he likes his action set pieces, this, that and the other. When you couple that with a script from the guy who gave us Lethal Weapon, then you've got gold. It's just a really great action comedy with plenty of one-liners, which you would expect from a script by Shane Black, but with really great chemistry between Damon Wayans and Bruce Willis. Like I say, you get that right, you get that chemistry right between those two leads, and you've got gold. And that's what you get with this film. Number 72 is Princess Mononoke, a contender for best of the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli films. I'll hold my hand up and say I am no way near being a professional or an expert when it comes to those movies. I've seen something like 7 or 8 of them, but of the 7 or 8 of them that I've seen, my 2 favourites are this and Spirited Away. They're the 2 contenders for best so far from what I've seen. But yeah, Princess Mononoke, just nuts at times. The story is bonkers. I think Fern Gully, Avatar, that kind of thing, but with a real horror bent and a lot of other stuff going in. Lord of the Rings meets Fern Gully, and there's a lot of influences in there, and the animation is absolutely beautiful. Really fluid animation. You look at some of the stuff and you're just like, that's so cinematic. It's like I can see that being live action. If they made it live action, it'd all be CGI anyway, so technically it wouldn't be live action, but you get the drift. Great film, great animated film. And number 71, Last of the Mohicans, a Michael Mann period drama, really great love story, but all stuck within the context of war. Really great period stuff, fantastic central performance by Daniel Day-Lewis. Also Madeleine Stowe, who was a favourite of mine back in the 90s. Loved her in the likes of Unlawful Entry and 12 Monkeys. Really great actress that I don't really hear a right lot from these days, but big Madeleine Stowe fan back in the day. Yeah, this is just great, hard-hitting period drama that's got some pretty gnarly stuff in it. Number 70, You Can't Handle the Truth. That's right, it's A Few Good Men, written by Aaron Sorkin, based on his stage play of the same name. And yeah, phenomenal drama. Tom Cruise being really great in what he does, and Jack Nicholson just chewing up the scenery in what little bits of scenery he gets to chew up. Yeah, he chews it up, spits it out, and gives us a speech for the ages. Number 69, speaking of 12 Monkeys, it's right here. Great film by Terry Gilliam, his best as far as I'm concerned. I think Terry Gilliam's a little bit overrated, if I'm being perfectly honest. But if there was one film that I would measure him by, it would be this. I think it's a great science fiction film. Madeleine Stowe, as I say, really great in it. Bruce Willis, really great in it. One of Bruce Willis's best performances here, to be honest. Brad Pitt as well, who I believe was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Oscar for this. I could be wrong. I think he was. He's really great in it too. Can you trust your own mind? It's like that's a central question that runs throughout. Can you trust your memories? Can you trust your own thoughts? And at every step of the central figure's journey, we are asking that question. Is he really from the future, or is this all in his own head? Number 68 is Sleepy Hollow. This is back when Tim Burton was my favourite director. He had a really solid body of work throughout the 90s, late 80s and throughout the 90s. And I would say that Sleepy Hollow was really the last was the end of that period. After Sleepy Hollow, he kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole for a while before he gave us like a couple of really solid films with lots of Big Fish and Big Eyes. Sleepy Hollow was kind of the end of an era for me. That was back when, in '98, I could say that Tim Burton was my favourite director still at that point. Things have changed a lot since then, but I still have a lot of fondness, a lot of affection for this film. The production design is absolutely beautiful, as is usually the case on a Burton movie, to be honest. If you're a fan of Hammer films, like Hammer Horror, Universal Horror, those kind of things, this is a bit of a throwback to all those kind of movies, a love letter to them. I am a fan of those movies, so I appreciate this on every level that you need to. And there are some genuine scares in it as well. Maybe jump scares, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it does have one of the best jump scares of any film, I think. And beyond that, it is also quite amusing. Number 67 is one of the best slasher horror movies ever made, and not just of the 90s, but period, and that is Candyman. Horror in the 90s was in a bit of a rough spot. There's not that many great horror movies in the 90s. You think Scream and its sequels, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Horror it wasn't great, but Candyman is one of those rare gems, a golden nugget sat in the middle of the 90s that just took the horror genre, took the slasher genre to new heights, places it hadn't been before. Really delves into the building of a mythology, where myth comes from and how it affects cultures from which they are born. Great Gothic, modern Gothic horror. Number 66 is Tim Burton yet again. This time it's Ed Wood, a really great film about a really terrible filmmaker. And what really this film is about, it's not the fact that he was a terrible filmmaker, it's the fact that he didn't care. He did what he loved, irrespective of whether people liked what he did. Edward D. Wood Jr., he had a verve, a passion for what he did, and he didn't let the criticism stop him from doing it. And I think there's a good lesson in that. Do what you love because you love doing it. Not because you want the fame, not because you want the fortune, but because you love doing it. Number 65 is The Crow. I've already alluded to this film when I talked about Blade. Yeah, this was really, until Blade, this was the last great comic book movie adaptation. When you're talking about like superhero type stuff, a very dark superhero. I'm not sure you'd call him a superhero, anti-hero, I guess. Yeah, it's a dark one. It's very gothic, very black as night. Some stuff in it, for me, goes a little bit too much down the dark rabbit hole, but it's still an absolute classic. Great final performance from Brandon Lee. Really sad that he passed away during the making of this, but the end result is phenomenal. Number 64 is Paul Thomas Anderson's epic Boogie Nights, a movie about the porn industry, which, as far as a synopsis goes, doesn't really seem up my street, but it's about the damaging effects of the porn industry, but also the addiction of it. I will review Boogie Nights at some point, but it's an epic film. It's a behemoth. It's long in running time and it's really deep. It's got a lot of character stuff going on. It's multiple stories, all crisscrossing in and out of each other. Very much like what he would go on to do with Magnolia. It's a tough ride. It's one of them, you get to the end of it and you really feel like you've been through it. But kind of all the better for coming out the other side. Number 63 is The X-Files Fight the Future, or The X-Files Movie, for those who aren't familiar with its subtitle. The first big screen outing of The X-Files. Now, as an X-Files fanatic, for those who don't know, I do have a podcast with a friend of mine, Graham Davidson, called The X-Files Revisited Podcast. You can find that on YouTube, and you can find the audio version on things like Spotify and Amazon Music, places like that. Yeah, big X-Files fan. And this came out right when my X-Files fandom was at its peak. I could not have been more excited for this film when it hit. And yeah, as an X-Files fan, this hit big for me. It's a really great movie. It's a really great science fiction film. I totally understand that if you're coming to this as a newbie and you're not an X-Files fan, you're not versed in the lore, you're not versed in who Mulder and Scully are, there may be things about it that just seem average. All right. But I am an X-Files fan. And I was really, as I say, at my peak when this came out, and this just did it for me. Still does. I watch it even now, and it's a bit of a nostalgia trip for me, for who I was back in '98 when this came out. So, yeah. The X-Files movie, great stuff. Number 62 is Quiz Show, directed by Robert Redford. This is based on a true story movie about a quiz show that was rigged, and it's fascinating. It's beautifully written, it's brilliantly acted, and it's just a fascinating true story where when you see it and you look at what went on, you kind of like, it's insane that they got away with that. But yeah, great drama, top tier drama. And a fantastic performance as well by John Turturro in this, which I don't say regularly. I like John Turturro, but he can be a bit slapstick at times. He can be a bit, like he is in Transformers. He does that kind of performance a bit too much. Here, he does a genuinely good, taken seriously performance, and I wish he'd do more of them because he's actually a pretty phenomenal actor when he wants to be. Number 61 is Casino. This is a very, very good companion piece to Goodfellas. All the same people involved, still kind of within that world of gangsters and whatnot. It's just not quite as good. And when I say not quite as good, I'm talking marginal. The difference is marginal. I think at one point I would have said that I preferred Casino, to be honest. But I think I saw Casino first. So of Casino and Goodfellas, I saw Casino first. So by the time I got around to seeing Goodfellas, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Obviously, I've seen both films again since my initial viewings, and things have changed. But so yeah, Goodfellas is on this list. It's not been on yet. Casino, just great performances. Sharon Stone, who knew that she had this in her at the time? It's like she'd kind of been languishing a bit in a career ever since Basic Instinct, because once Basic Instinct came out, that's it, that's all people could see, and she really struggled to kind of find a place within the industry after that. When she did this, when she did Casino, and she showed that, oh, actually, she's got a set of chops on her, set of acting chops. She can act. She's not just that woman who parted her legs in Basic Instinct. No, she can act. Top talent, all on their A game. Really great drama. A few scenes in it that are a bit icky, stuff that are really hard to watch, make me kind of hold my eye. You know what I'm talking about. Number 60 is The English Patient, another film that won Best Picture at the Oscars. This is a long, sprawling kind of period drama, very much in the vein of David Lean. You think Lawrence of Arabia, that kind of thing, the type of film that David Lean was very famous for making. This is Anthony Minghella doing David Lean and doing it exceptionally well. Now the film does move a little bit slow in places. I think a lot of people these days will say it's got pacing issues, but I just think it takes its time. It explores these characters. It's not in a rush to get there. It's actually quite a fascinating drama. Once it gets going, it's one of those dramas where actually I don't want to turn it off. I'm hooked into it. I want to see where it goes. And it looks beautiful. Cinematography in it is absolutely gorgeous. Number 59 is Shortcuts. This is, again, a bit like Boogie Nights, a bit like Magnolia. It's one of those films that's got loads of different stories that kind of crisscross. One of the stories that actually takes place in this went on to become a film of its own called Jindabyne, if I've pronounced that right, Australian film by Ray Lawrence. It's got a lot going on in it, but it's really about humanity as a whole, which I know is quite a broad stroke. I'm going to do a film about humanity as a whole. But no, we see all walks of life as they crisscross in and out of each other's stories. To say that it's about just one thing would be doing it a disservice, because as I say, each character has their own journey and something can be gleaned from each one of those. And that's what makes the film so fascinating. It's what makes it so watchable and enticing. There are some stories within it that are more intriguing than others. And when it when it veers away from, let's say, that particular story and goes back to this one, you kind of, oh, okay, just get back there. I was more interested there, and that's probably why it's not quite as high up as I have certain other films that are of this ilk, shall we say. Number 58 is The Prince of Egypt. This is the first animated film to be put out by SKG, DreamWorks Studios, and it is an absolute banger. I was a bit nervous at first when I heard about the making of this, when I heard about what they were doing, adapting a biblical story. I was, okay, let's see what they do with this. But unlike, say, Ridley Scott's attempt at adapting the Exodus story, this one takes a very biblical approach, but also very modern. Just really great animation, top-notch voice cast. It's very well directed. It doesn't feel like it only would appeal to the biblical crowd. I don't think you have to be a Christian or a Jew to take something away from this movie. I think it has something for everyone. Number 57 is Rushmore. This was the second feature film from director Wes Anderson after Bottle Rocket. This was the first film of his that I saw, and I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't heard of it really. I think I'd seen a review in Empire, but then time had passed and I kind of dismissed it, forgot about it, and then I just watched it, caught it on video, and I was like, what is this film? Who is this director? Really great stuff. Just a high school movie in which there's a relationship between a high school boy and this man that's kind of funny and quirky, and then goes down the pan when they both end up fancying the same woman, and it becomes a competition. It's funny. It's quite heartfelt, and there's a lot of really great movie references in there for geeks like me. It's Anderson at his best. And number 56 is The Usual Suspects. Really phenomenal performances across the board, even from like no bit parts like Benicio del Toro. You look at his role on paper, there's nothing there really, but he makes it, he sells it, he adds things, with what he's doing on screen, like even when he's got no dialogue, that makes that role memorable. And then, of course, Kevin Spacey in a knockout performance with a really great twist. Number 55 is Philadelphia, starring Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. This film is pretty much a reactionary film to the backlash that Demi suffered from making The Silence of the Lambs, in very much the same way that Intolerance was a response film to the backlash that D.W. Griffith suffered when he made Birth of a Nation. Obviously, there was a lot of kind of trans activists backlash to the portrayal of Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, which kind of hurt Jonathan Demme. So his next project was Philadelphia, all about gay rights, and it's almost that, see, I am one of you guys kind of movie, but just so happens to be a really good film with excellent performances, really heartfelt, touching drama. And number 54 is Beauty and the Beast. This is made smack bang in the middle of Disney's kind of golden period, that started with the likes of Little Mermaid. Then you had this, you had Lion King and Hunchback of Notre Dame, Aladdin. Yeah, it literally this period of Disney, back to back, wall to wall, just throwing out classics. Think about a lot of the Disney classics, they just came from this era. And yeah, Beauty and the Beast, one of the best. It's great animation, great songs, and a story, a tale that is old as time, that basically means it's relatable to anyone. Number 53 is Breakdown. Great central performance by Kurt Russell, who is this everyman, just at a loose end, totally in the crap, basically, in a situation nobody would want to be in, doesn't know what to do, how to resolve it, and it's tense. You're with this guy every step of the way, and you're pulling your hair out in the same way that he is, and you're just thinking, what would I do? What would I do in this situation? His wife's been kidnapped, he knows who's got her, but no one's listening. What do you do? How do you find her? Where's she gone? It's just desperation. You feel that desperation that the main character is feeling. It's very tense. It barely puts a foot wrong. Of this kind of movie, it's a perfect example. Number 52 is Point Break, directed by Catherine Bigelow. This is a great action movie starring Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. It was later remade to really piss poor effect. Yes, the remake is terrible, absolutely terrible. But this is just great early 90s cheesy action. Fist pumping, machismo kind of, yeah. It's there's a lot of testosterone running through this movie. It's got to be said, but surprisingly directed by a woman. So there you go. And number 51 is Aladdin. I really struggle with Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, which is my favourite. I flip flop. Ask me another day. Beauty and the Beast would probably be in this spot, or Aladdin would be a few further down at all. It's a great movie, and it's the first film that I went to see at the cinema by myself. I was 13 years old. I don't know if I was meant to be in school or what, but either way, I was passing the cinema. I saw the poster for Aladdin. I'd heard all about it, and I thought, you know what? Bugger it. I'm going in by myself. And the love of going to the cinema on my own, hopefully in an empty screen, was cemented in that moment. Yeah, really great film, great adventure, good thrill ride, classic villain, classic Disney villain, brilliant Robin Williams performance where he's just riffing on his own, and yeah, it's just absolute gem. Number 50 is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, another Disney classic. Like I say, this period, wall-to-wall classics, very hard to kind of put these films in order. This is literally how they sit at the moment. That could all change on rewatch or just depending on how I feel on the day. But at this moment in time, Hunchback of Notre Dame is my favourite of that golden period. It deals with a lot of Christian themes. A lot of theology can be gleaned from this movie. It's quite a dark tale, but told in typical Disney fashion that stops it from getting too dark. Though I do think we don't credit kids enough with what they're able to glean from things like this. But yeah, it's a fascinating story, and it shows how people can be corrupted through the allure of sex, or the idea of sex, through lust. Number 49 is Jurassic Park, a film I did not get to see at the cinema because my friends had already seen it when we went. And so we ended up watching The Last Action Hero instead, which, for the longest time became the brunt of my frustration for not being able to see Jurassic Park in the cinema. But yeah, Jurassic Park. Watched it on video when for the first time I saw it, and wished I'd been able to see it at the cinema at the time. But yeah, it was one of those films that once I'd seen it, that was it. We were watching it constantly, again and again and again. Not just me, not just my brothers, but all of us as a family. It was one of those films that as a family, you'd all enjoy it. It was just a good time. Spielberg knows how to straddle that line of making a film that is actually quite dark and has a lot of horror elements, but it's kind of good for the whole family as well. So yeah, he's a family horror film maker, and the best of the bunch. Just great effects that still hold up even today. There's effects work in the Jurassic Park sequels that aren't as good as the effects work in the original Jurassic Park, which is just mind-boggling. But yeah, that's what you get when the industry is putting out so many effects-laden film that the work gets diluted. But absolute classic for good reason. Brilliant story, great characters, fantastic special effects. Spielberg on top form. Number 48 is As Good as It Gets. Brilliant central performance by Jack Nicholson. Also great leading female performance from Helen Hunt. Just a really great drama about a guy who is very unlikable, who is just a miserable old fart, and yet across the course of this movie, he's softened by the characters he interacts with and becomes lovable. It's Again, it's a story that's as old as time, but it's one we need to be reminded of. Inside every miserable old fart is a decent human being just trying to get out. Number 47 is Goodfellas. Been a long time since I've seen this film. There's a few on here that definitely have the potential to go higher, to rise. And this is one of them. As I say, it's been a while since I've seen Goodfellas. Take this positioning with a pinch of salt, but yeah, 48, Goodfellas. Brilliant gangster film, just an excellent movie about aspirations, achieving those aspirations, and realizing that in the end, it all means absolutely dick. Number 46 is The Thin Red Line, a war movie from director Terrence Malick that is very much a meditation on humanity as much as it is a film about war. We spend much of the time kind of just seeing our central character just, daydreaming and hearing the inner workings of his mind as he reflects on everything that's going on around him. It's a very meditative film, as one would come to expect from Malick in recent years. But this was really the start of that kind of, particularly the whole idea of using voiceover as we see what's going on with characters and teaming them together to great effect, I would say. But yeah, this is a really immersive film, which is another trait I've come to expect from Malick. He does make quite immersive cinema that pulls you in, where even if you're not entirely sure what's going on, even if you're not entirely sure what he's trying to say, you can't help but be engrossed. And that's part of it with Malick for me. But this is definitely one of his best works. Again, a stacked cast, most of whom thought they were going to be in the film for much longer, much bigger roles than they actually were. Yeah, Malick makes the film in the edit, and there are actors involved in this who say they shot tons of stuff and then don't even appear in the film. But however he works is however he works. Either way, at the end of it all, at the end of that process, we get a really great war film. Number 45 is Braveheart. Another Best Picture Oscar winner. Really great directorial effort from Mel Gibson. Kind of brought back the whole sword and sandals type movie, some years before Gladiator. And just made it brutal, made it bloody, made the battle scenes intensely realistic. Did not shy away from just what it is, really, to be hit in the face with a mace and things like that. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal to watch. But on top of it all is just a good old-fashioned story about a hero going up against the man, in this case, the English, those terrible, pesky, scumbag English. It's a great film. Is Gibson's accent, a bit ropey? Yeah, it is. It leaves much to be desired. But the performance itself, accent aside, is still a really great one. Still really brings you in to this guy's world and what he's about and what he's trying to achieve. Number 44 is The Mask of Zorro. A really underrated action-adventure movie that doesn't get talked about anymore. And yet, at the time, one of my favourite films of the year. Was this like 97, 98, I think? Maybe 98? It's a really great action-adventure. Antonio Banderas is perfectly cast in the role. His chemistry with him and Catherine Zeta-Jones is really electric. The action set pieces are phenomenal. The sword play is again really phenomenal. Just all that. It's directed by Martin Campbell, who reinvented Bond not once but twice, and he brings all of the flair he had for action in those movies to this. And if you've not seen it, do check it out. The sequel, not quite as good, but certainly this one was a really great start to what could have been a long-running franchise. And number 43 is Star Trek First Contact. A top-tier Star Trek movie. The best of the Next Generation crew movies. And yeah, it brings in their greatest foe, which is the Borg. I love all the analogies to Moby Dick, all the metaphors in Moby Dick and how they relate to Picard chasing his whale. It gives each of the main characters, each of the main cast from the Next Generation crew, their own little bits to kind of to chew on. But this is Picard's story. Picard and Data, but mostly Picard, again, as I say, playing that Ahab role, trying to hunt his whale, playing for vengeance rather than thinking with his head about what the best play is for his crew. And yeah, seeing the results of that play out make for really entertaining sci-fi adventure. And number 42 is Toy Story. A film that I don't really watch a right lot these days. It's one that I still appreciate just because of the impact it had on movies as a whole. It's the first fully CGI movie. And back then it looked phenomenal. You look at it now and some of the animations like, oh, blimey, we've come on, haven't we? We've seriously come on. My desire to revisit it has somewhat diminished over the years. But as far as just a story goes, as far as like the characters and the way they're written, it's perfection. Number 41 is Fargo, a thriller that is very black comedy, right up my street. For anyone who knows me, In Bruges is my number one comedy of all time. Some people think I'm smoking crack for saying that, but I'm sorry, it is. It's a comedy. And this is the same. Fargo is a comedy. Yes, it's got thriller elements. Yes, it's very dark, but it's a comedy. If you look at what's going on screen and the way people are talking, and you think you're not supposed to laugh at this, then you're wrong. This is meant to be funny, and it is funny. And, that final scene with the wood chipper, if you don't laugh at that, then you're taking it all wrong. You're coming at it with the wrong mindset, the wrong perspective. It's funny. It's dark, but it's funny. Number 40 is Batman Returns. As I say, back in the 90s, huge Tim Burton fan, even bigger Batman fan. And it was essentially his 1-2 punch of Batman and Batman Returns that made me a Batman fan. Batman Returns was actually my favourite movie of all time up until like 99. Well, 99, yeah, maybe 2000. But yeah, like Batman Returns was just, for me, was like the gold standard of movies. Now, obviously, I've seen a lot more movies since then, so not the case anymore. But even so, like, it still holds up on multiple levels. The production design is some of the most beautiful of any movie, period. Don't care what you say. You look at this film, it's just absolutely stunning. Not really the kind of movie that you would want to sell Happy Meal toys for. But there you go. Yeah, anyway, Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer. At 12, 13 years old, this was the woman I was going to grow up and marry. That didn't happen, but at the time, that's what I thought. And number 39 is Pulp Fiction. Gimp scene aside, which I really struggled to watch, this is a phenomenal film. It's Quentin Tarantino, off the leash, unhinged, just letting all of this stuff that is kept inside him for many a year as a movie buff, as a movie fan, and just going, what would I do? Well, I'd do this. And yeah, Pulp Fiction. It's hard to really qualify what this film is in terms of genre, in terms of just anything else that's like it. It's its own thing. It's Tarantino-esque. It is Tarantino in its purest form. Great characters. Not necessarily moral characters, but still great characters that shine a light on the human condition in multiple ways. Zinger dialogue that many people tried to copy afterwards and failed miserably to do so. It's a unique vision, for sure. And number 38 is Thelma and Louise. Ridley Scott on his A game, telling a story about powerful women doing it for themselves, women taking back the power from the men that have downtrodden them, long before the woke kind of generation of the modern era. This is a film that felt timely when it came out, and it still has male characters in it that are likable, that we can see their perspective. Not all of the male characters in it are absolute douchebags, which is the problem with a lot of woke stuff today, is that the men are put down in order to prop the women up, whereas that's not really the case here. This is just, these women are in a hard, sticky situation, and they're going to do something about it. It's great. I shudder to think what they'd do with this today if they did a remake. If I ever hear that they're going to do a remake of Thelma and Louise, that's it. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm done. And number 37 is Jackie Brown. I'd say the most underrated of Tarantino films. I mean, as you can see, I've put it above Pulp Fiction, which a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads at, I'm sure. But I do slightly prefer it to Pulp Fiction. I feel the story is a bit more focused, I would say. It doesn't feel like it's a lot of random stuff kind of all going on and intermingling. It feels like each section is related to one through line. It feels a bit more mature to me. I feel like the relationship between Jackie Brown and the officer that is kind of supposed to be monitoring her, I feel that is really well handled from the actors and from the writing by Tarantino. Yeah, I like that relationship. And it's showing a bit of a softer side from Tarantino, a bit of a romantic side from Tarantino, to many a degree. But yeah, again, great characters, great writing, great performances. At number 36 is Ride with the Devil, directed by Ang Lee. It's been a long time since I've seen this, but back in the day I watched this a lot. This was like my go-to Western. This was like, for me, like my two favourite Westerns back then were like Unforgiven and this. But yeah, I never hear anyone talking about this movie. And the fact that Ang Lee has had such a prolific career, and this is one of the movies he made that is an A-game movie, top tier Western, top tier Ang Lee film. I feel like, yeah, it's about time people talked about it. It's about time people kind of dug it up and realised it's still sitting there. It's still ready for you to watch and catch on to the fact that it's an absolute banging film. Number 35 is Three Kings, a brilliant movie from director David O. Russell that was famous for its kind of on-set wranglings between Clooney and the director. They came to blows many a time on the set, but the end result, regardless, is phenomenal. It's a brilliant movie about the Gulf War, about some soldiers that decide they're going to try and steal some money, but ultimately in their endeavour to steal that gold, end up getting involved in a truly humanitarian expedition, so to speak. So it's a film that's got a lot of humanity at the heart of a war story, and it doesn't take a traditional approach to a war film. We see scenes like the bullet going in from the inside of a body in slow-mo, like close examination, and that really kind of shows you the effects, the damage that is done from weaponry. And yeah, creative things like that littered throughout by one of my favourite directors, a director who I probably don't like as a person, as a human being, based on what I know about him, and yet whose movies I really, truly do appreciate. It's that thing in it, the line between art and the person who created it. And number 34 is True Romance, a screenplay by Quentin Tarantino, which is every bit as good as you would expect, and directed by Tony Scott, who brings the Tony Scott visual flair, the bombast. It's great. This was the film that knocked Batman Returns off the top spot for quite a few years, a couple of years anyway. Batman Returns, favourite film of all time, and then like very late 90s, I saw True Romance, and this became my number one film for a period. Loved this film a lot back in the day. I used to watch it all the time. I have reviewed it on my channel. But yeah, great stuff from Christian Slater. Some brilliant lines of dialogue. Some great little set pieces. I don't mean action set pieces, but just like, you know, character moments where you stick certain characters in a situation with each other, let them do their stuff. Gary Oldman as Drexel, hilarious. Just great characters that I keep going back to wanting to see. Again, like morally deficient, morally bankrupt, but stick them all in a room together and it's highly entertaining. And number 33 is Schindler's List. Top tier Spielberg, not a film that you would tend to revisit. You know, I'm never going to be, oh, I think I'll just bang on Schindler's List. I fancy a bit of that. It's a hard going film. It's a film that you feel like you kind of have to watch out of a responsibility kind of thing. You know, it's in that sense, it's a must-watch film. But it's a hard watch. It's a very hard watch. It's not fun, but it's brilliant filmmaking. It's top tier filmmaking. This is like one of the movies that kind of slightly breaks my rules a little bit of what makes a 5-star film, because for me, part of what makes a 5-star film is the rewatchability. But the other two criteria of what make a 5-star film are kind of like they're hitting like 6 and 7, so they bump it up. So yeah, in that respect, you know, it is a 5-star film. Not one I want to revisit much, but very hard hitting, phenomenal performances, beautiful cinematography, and yeah, just filmmaking at its finest. And number 32 is Leon. I'd never heard of director Luc Besson when I first watched Leon. This was my introduction to him, and yeah, this was just like, wow, okay, who's this guy? I want to check out the rest of his work. Yeah, brilliant film. Natalie Portman in, is it her first role? I think it might be her first role. But either way, yeah, as a child star, phenomenal performance. Her and Jean Reno just making a great double act. Him as this hitman who reluctantly takes on this girl, who, you know, whose parents have been murdered, and he ends up becoming like a surrogate father, and she wants him to train her in the ways of being a hit woman so that she can kill the man who killed her parents. Scenery chewing performance in you know, the very definition of that phrase in Gary Oldman, who plays the villain in this film. Yeah, if you look up the term scenery chewing, you should see a picture of Gary Oldman from Leon. Number 31 is another Best Picture Oscar winner, Dances with Wolves, directed by Kevin Costner, who at the time when he went to direct this was pretty much kind of like, people were, yeah, this isn't a good idea for you, Kevin. This is going to be a bit of a disaster, to be perfectly honest. And he comes out and actually gives us one of the best, one of the finest westerns ever made, that was one of the first films to give a truly great representation of the Native American. You know, maybe not perfect by, you know, today's standards. I'm sure things could be found now that would be, you know, let's judge things through the lens of what we know 30 years after the fact. But no, when this came out, this was kind of revolutionary for me anyway. I you know, my experience of Native Americans was Indians in John Wayne movies and things like that. They weren't particularly well representative of the indigenous culture, whereas Dances with Wolves really treated that side of things, that aspect, respectfully and beautifully and poetically. And yeah, it's a great western. Number 30 is The Big Lebowski, which for the longest time was my favourite Coen Brothers film. I think it's one of those films that you maybe grow out of a little bit, depending on your age. I think it's certainly a film you relate more to in your 20s, your teens and your 20s, and even through a little bit of your 30s, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it's still a phenomenal movie. It's, yeah, the slacker to end all slackers in Lebowski. and the way he just bumbles through this whole plot, never changing. You know, you get to the end of the film, he's the same man at the end of the film as he was at the start. And that's a big no-no in cinema. We're often told that you don't do that when you make a movie. But I think this is a perfect example of how to do that and get away with it. Number 29 is Joel Schumacher's best film. It is Falling Down. Michael Douglas losing the plot for a good 90 minutes or so. And it's kind of darkly funny. You know, the scene where he goes into the burger joint and he calls him out on the poster and the sweaty mess that he gets in his bag. It's comedy gold. Some people come against this film and you know, they have all the usual kind of criticisms about it being about, you know, your white middle class guy who's white privilege and all that. And it's just I don't think it is. I think anybody can relate to this movie. Anyone can relate to the fact that sometimes life is crap and we don't know how to deal with the stuff, and sometimes we're not very good at relationships. Sometimes people aren't shown how to be good at relationships, and it just ends in mess. And in the case of this film, it gets really messy because this guy gets super unhinged. But I still can't help but feel a little bit sorry for this guy, despite the fact that ultimately he is in the wrong. The things that he does, he shouldn't be doing. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that there haven't been times where I've seen a road closure and thought, you know what, if I had a rocket launcher right now. Number 28, hoo-ha! It's Scent of a Woman, a film that gets often lampooned because of Pacino's hoo-ha performance, but I love it. I absolutely love it. I think this is a really warm-hearted drama that's just, it gives me the feels. When I watch it, I get to the end and I'm just, you know what, it's quite schmaltzy, but in the best possible sense. It's the age-old story of two people who don't really have anything in common, get kind of teamed up, they have to go on a journey, and by the end of that journey, they're the best of friends. You know, and that's a perfect template for a movie. And this is a perfect example of that. I love Scent of a Woman. I think it's a great drama. A lot of people are, Pacino got the Oscar for this. He should have got. I don't care. I'm happy he got the Oscar. You know, it's still a great performance. You can mock his hoo-haing in this all you want, but the fact of the matter is, it was a bold choice, and it's still a great performance. I still feel something throughout this film because of the work that Pacino is doing. Number 27, Miller's Crossing, the Coen brothers film that usurped Big Lebowski as my favourite. I think if you're looking at Coen brothers, for me, Raising Arizona, Big Lebowski and Miller's Crossing, they're kind of my gold standards, really. And obviously Fargo, which has appeared on this list. Yeah, Miller's Crossing, phenomenal gangster film. And I love it because it sets itself in the perfect period to make a gangster film. You know, the 30s, 40s kind of deal with those classic cars and the Tommy guns. And to me, that's like, Public Enemy's style, golden era gangster. You know, if you're going to measure gangster eras, forget all your 80s and 90s gangsters, your 70s gangsters. For me, it's all about the 30s, 40s gangster. They need a Tommy gun, they need a big Chrysler kind of to drive. I love all that stuff. Number 26 is The Iron Giant, a movie that I don't care how old you are, if you get to the end of this and you don't have at least a little tear in your eye, then you're stone cold. You've got no heart. Number 25 is Reservoir Dogs, Quentin Tarantino's directorial debut. This is a man who's cooking on the will to just serve up whatever's in his brain without fear of what anyone's going to think, and just, look, this is the movie I want to make, I'm going to make it, and just having the balls to make it. And it's rough, it's gritty, it's dark, it's comic at times, the dialogue just zings, the characters feel like fully fleshed out, rounded people, again, somewhat morally bankrupt, but phenomenal debut. You know, Not the first script he wrote, but the first that he directed. And yeah, a star was born in terms of directors. Number 24 is Scream. This is the first movie that I went to see at the cinema more than once. 3 times, in fact, I went to see this at the cinema. And up until this point, I was never really the biggest horror fan. There were a few horrors I liked, Critters, that kind of thing. More your comedy horror type stuff. But I was never deep. I never went deep into horror until Scream. It was one of those movies that I'd come home from school and watch on video on a regular basis. And I think my mum got sick of it, to be honest. She was in the kitchen, usually, and could hear, what's Brian watching? It'd be a choice of either Critters, one of the Batman films, or Scream, or something. Yeah, there was a handful of movies that were just constantly put on rotation, and Scream was definitely one of them. And I just think she got sick of it in the end, so she stayed in the kitchen so she didn't have to hear it. But yeah, this kind of sent me on a rabbit hole into the horror genre, turned me into a horror fan. Number 23 is Silence of the Lambs. A bit of a phenomenon, this film, when it came out. I remember all the hoopla surrounding it, all the hype. I think when I saw it for the first time, I was maybe not quite as sold on it because of that hype. But it is a film that over the intervening years, the more and more I watch it, the more and more I study it, the way that Jonathan Demme is using the camera, the bold choices he's making, I've just really grown to appreciate a lot more. Number 22 is Speed. This is a movie that I've taken a little bit of heat from some people because I did say that I personally think it's better than Die Hard. Marginally. When I did my top 100 movies, Die Hard was at whatever position it was, and then the next movie just above it was Speed. So, like, for me, they're on a par, Die Hard essentially reinvented the genre. Speed took that template that was made by Die Hard or reinvented by Die Hard and said, all right, let's do that, but bring more to it. And for me, I just find the characters a bit more relatable. I'm sucked into the drama of it a bit more. I'm more emotionally engaged. And that's why, marginally, I prefer it over Die Hard. But yeah, one of Keanu Reeves' best films. Brilliant performance from Sandra Bullock that really made everyone fall in love with her. And some phenomenal action sequences. Number 21 for me is The Hurricane. This is perhaps my favourite Denzel Washington movie. It is the movie of his that doesn't get talked about anywhere near as much as it should. But yeah, definitely very underrated. Norman Jewison, I think, directed this and does a fantastic job. True story about Reuben Hurricane Carter, obviously made even more famous by the song of the same name as this film, The Hurricane, by Bob Dylan. That was my introduction to Carter as well, was the Bob Dylan song. Actually, my favourite Bob Dylan song, as it were. And yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to see this film, because I was so big on that song. And then, yeah, this movie just hit me emotionally in all the best possible ways. And Washington, as I say, gives what for me is, if not his best performance, certainly one of his best performances. Number 20 is Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Massive fan of Batman the animated series. This was the movie, that was spawned from that. And damn, it's good. It's like, this is better than most live-action superhero movies. It's better than most live-action Batman movies. It's just story, character. It's what it's always about. And here, they nail it. Story, the character, they get Batman from the comic books right. Certainly the iterations that I fell in love with around the 80s and 90s. Very much inspired by that era of comic books. Phenomenal film, and created a new villain that was quite intriguing and yeah, really solid villain for the Batman mythos. Number 19 is Grosse Point Blank, a film about a hitman going back to his high school reunion. That right there is all you need to know to say, you know what, that's an intriguing prospect. It's a comedy film, it's an action film, it's a love story, it's a great movie. If you've not seen Grosse Point Blank, go check it out. For many a year, they were talking about doing a sequel, and I'm glad it never came off. I feel like this is one of those films that should be a one and done. I feel like if we'd got a sequel to it, they probably would have ruined the legacy. I'm happy this is a one and done. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's hilarious at times. There's some phenomenal fight choreography in it. And yeah, some really great bursts of action and just some real great relationship drama stuff between the central character and the girl that he finds when he goes back to his high school reunion. Great stuff. Number 18 is Unforgiven. A case can be made, I think, for this being the best Western ever made. There is only a handful of Westerns I can think of that would give it a run for its money. But yeah, certainly this was the Western that got me into Westerns, if I'm being honest. You know, I saw this back in, probably would have been 94, 95, and was so engrossed in it. And I was like, oh, that's a Western. I mean, like, I'd seen Westerns before, but they were all your dad's Westerns, your John Wayne stuff, the stuff that used to bore me to tears as a kid on a Saturday afternoon when your dad had control of the TV and he'd be watching some dull-ass Western. It's like, oh, man, let it all end. This was the first Western I saw that made me go, oh, okay, so that's what a Western can be. And yeah, phenomenal stuff. The directing by Eastwood, he had the script for this for years, for a couple of decades, at least one decade, and he sat on it until he was the right age to make it. And that was a perfect choice because he was the perfect choice to star and he was the perfect choice to direct. And that's the reason this won Best Picture at the Oscars. Number 17 is Out of Sight. Still my favourite film from director Steven Soderbergh. This is the film that really helped to stop George Clooney's career going completely down the toilet after Batman and Robin and A Perfect Storm. It was kind of just in lightweight fair territory that was like, this could end him. But then he teamed up with Soderbergh, as I said, made this film, and the rest is history. He started using his noggin. He started thinking, okay, it's time to start picking projects that are quality, that aren't just, designed to hit the multiplexes and bring in the biggest crowd. So many great characters. Michael Keaton's character from Jackie Brown appears in this, because both movies were based on the books by Elmore Leonard. So yeah, Soderbergh got permission from Tarantino and the like to use Michael Keaton again in this. So technically, this Jackie Brown and this exist in the same world. You could watch the two of them; they exist in the same world. That's the way I look at it, anyway. But yeah, phenomenal film, great characters, great direction, phenomenal chemistry between Jennifer Lopez and George Clooney, which is, looking back now on the career that Lopez has had, is something you wouldn't think I'd say. So yeah, if you've only seen everything that she's done after this, trust me, don't let that decide for you. Go and watch this and you'll see that actually Lopez can give a good performance if she's with the right director. It's just unfortunate that since then she's never really been with the right director. And number 16 is Saving Private Ryan. Again, Spielberg on top form, one of the best war movies ever made. The battle sequences were just revolutionary. We'd never seen battle sequences like this. Famous stories of veterans going to see this and essentially having flashbacks, feeling like they were back there, because just the way it's shot is so immersive, brings you right into the heat of the battle, and not in a way that is exciting, that action movies do, but in a way that's just bloody scary, where you're watching this and you're like, I don't ever want to go to war, ever, because the excitement of, your old 50s and 60s war movies is completely lost in this. This is what a battle really looks like, and it is scary. It is brutal. You do not want to be there. It is the last place you want to be. And that opening 20 minutes, phenomenal. And then the intimacy of the kill in the latter part of the film with the knife, where I'm just shouting at the screen. Yeah, just Everything about it is perfect Spielberg. Number 15 is The Insider, starring Russell Crowe and Al Pacino, directed by Michael Mann. This is based on a true story kind of deal about the tobacco industry and about the whistleblower who kind of brought the tobacco industry to heel, brought them to task by, letting out the information that needed to be let out, really, which is that they knew full well that their product was addictive, and in fact they intentionally made it even more so in order to keep customers. Anyway, it's a great film. The drama is tense. The script is very tight. It is brilliantly written. It feels heavily researched. The characters really pull you in, thanks in large part to those performances by Crowe and Pacino. The first half of the film is kind of Crowe's, and then the second half of the film is Pacino's, as it kind of focuses on, first it focuses on that character and then it focuses on that character. But yeah, great stuff. This is Michael Mann at the top of his game. Michael Mann in the 90s was pretty much untouchable. He put out some fantastic work in the 90s. Number 14 is Edward Scissorhands, not perhaps. It is Tim Burton's best film. Even as a huge Batman fan, and I will watch his Batman movies more often than I watch Edward Scissorhands. But that's the fanboy in me. If I'm just talking cinema, what's the best film, the best written, the best directed, his best effort? It's Edward Scissorhands. It's his idea, it's his story. He didn't write the script though. He got help with the script on this. Caroline Thompson, is it? It's very much a Burton brainchild. It came from him. It's a modern day, if you want to call it that, Beauty and the Beast. It has a lot in common with Beauty and the Beast, but it's a beautiful film, both in concept, in character, and in story. And by the time you get to the end, for me at any rate, it gives me the feels. I feel for this character. I feel for him and his journey. And Danny Elfman, the score that he makes here for Edward Scissorhands, his best work, I would say. If you're going to listen to one Danny Elfman score, listen to his score for Edward Scissorhands. I think it's his best work. Number 13 is American Beauty, the debut film from director Sam Mendes. He had a big history in theatre. So, seeing this theatre boy kind of go to film, is he going to be able to do it? Well, yeah, he was. He makes an absolute banger. I'm not sure this film is held in as high a regard these days, because, I think the woke crowd have kind of got their mitts on things and are trying to change the narrative, so to speak, even more so after the allegations that were made and disproven in a court of law twice against Kevin Spacey. But that's neither here nor there. Talking about the movie, and the movie is phenomenal. It's just a great drama, a really piercing look at suburban households, the veneer that is placed up by suburbia. It all looks good, but underneath, the dark heart of man is not too far behind. It's lurking and it's dying to get out. That's really what the film's about. Hence the tagline, look closer. Things may look pretty on the surface, but not so underneath. Number 12 is The Shawshank Redemption. A lot of these films, for the past 10, 20 films, have been like 5-star movies for me. This is the gold standard for many. It's the number one movie of all time in many kind of critics circles. And it's not hard to see why that is. It's just a beautifully crafted film on every single level. It's beautifully written, it's beautifully directed. Roger Deakins' cinematography is A-game. The performances are phenomenal. It's really touching. There's so many beats in it that just make you want to cry or make you feel something, and that's, to me, what cinema is all about, is making you feel. And this film gives me that in spades, in so many different ways. Yeah, just Shawshank Redemption, absolute classic. Number 11 is Fight Club. This is the film that usurped, for me, True Romance. So, Batman Returns was my favourite movie. It was usurped by True Romance. and True Romance was usurped by Fight Club. Yeah, Fight Club for me, instant hit. As soon as I saw it, my brain was alive, and I had to tell everyone about it. And I was just like, have you seen Fight Club? You got to see Fight Club. It's just, so phenomenal. So many quotable lines, and certainly as a 19, 20-year-old, very relatable. You know, I felt that kind of detachment that people of that age around that time felt. Because we didn't have a great war to fight, really, at that age, for my generation. The war was very much within ourselves against modernity, against society, against what society was telling you had to be as a man. And I felt that. I certainly felt that. And this film was very, very much a rally cry against all that. You know, you are not your khakis. You are not your possessions. All this crap you see around me, this isn't me. It's an expression of what I like, but it's not me. And that's really what the film is about, to not be defined by stuff, but who you are and the decisions you make. That's what defines you. So yeah, great film. Fincher's best, not quite. I still say that spot is reserved for Zodiac, but yeah, top tier Fincher. Into my top 10 movies of the 90s now. Yeah, these are the creme de la creme. I mean, we've been in the creme de la creme for some time, to be honest. All these movies are gold. But yeah, top 10, here we go. At number 10, The Matrix. Yeah, just redefined action cinema. Came out of nowhere in a time when everybody was waiting for Star Wars, The Phantom Menace. Out came this little unknown film, The Matrix, and just blew everyone away. And by the end of the year, it was the only science fiction epic that people were talking about. Yeah, phenomenal stuff. Kind of wish they'd left it at that and not bothered with sequels. It kind of tarnished the reputation. But if you can forget those sequels and just fixate on the original film, it's a gold standard. It, again, like I say, it changed the way a lot of action cinema was done, the way it was shot. Yeah, it is a game changer in the truest sense of the word. And number 9 is another top tier David Fincher film. It's Seven. Yes. So back when when Fight Club was my favourite movie, I was of the age where I related to Fight Club more, and I actually preferred it to Seven. For the longest time, I would have said that Fight Club is a better film than Seven. As I've gotten older, only ever so slightly, Seven's kind of just come over. It's just started to go over Fight Club. Yeah, I just slightly prefer Seven. The way that it tells its story to me is it's a lot more reserved, shall we say. You know, it's about these two men, very opposite to one another, working the same case, becoming friends, seeing, you know, while they're coming at this from like different angles, they ultimately grow to respect each other and love each other. And, you know, there's a tragic ending in that, but yeah, it's a film that's got a lot to say about sin and about mankind as a whole. Mankind is not pretty, you know, whichever way you cut it. You know, yes, we've done a lot of beautiful things, but mankind on the whole is pretty dark. He's pretty sinful. Really does need a saviour, and I think that is evidenced by the nature of mankind that is on display in this film. But yeah, it's a really great movie. All the performances across the board, phenomenal. Fincher's direction, phenomenal. Obviously, this being a guy at this point in his career who had something to prove, coming off the back of a film that was laden with studio interference in Alien 3. And yeah, he comes out swinging. He swings big and he hits. Number 8, we're back to Michael Mann with Heat. Yeah, this is a phenomenal action crime drama that, you know, was a huge inspiration on my favourite movie of all time, The Dark Knight. You can see the blueprints of The Dark Knight in this film. Stacked cast, all doing some of their best work. The characters are truly engaging, helped greatly by what is clearly a very well-researched screenplay from Michael Mann, who gave this initial run at this with the film LA Takedown. He made this originally as LA Takedown and then eventually got given an actual budget, which would then make this 2-hour, 40-minute magnum opus that is just, one of the greatest movies ever made, not just one of the greatest movies of the 90s. Everyone talks about the action set piece in the middle, the gunfight. It's like 10-minute gunfight with no music, and it's the best, I would say, the best gun battle ever put on screen. But even in spite of that, everything else that is around it is still 5-star stuff. Just the character work that is being done is phenomenal. Heat, one of the best crime dramas ever made, without a doubt. Which brings me to number 7, another one of the greatest crime dramas ever made, LA Confidential. I've done a video essay on this film on my channel. You can find that somewhere on my channel. I think there's a lot to discuss in it, so I'm not going to go into it now, but do look for that video on my channel if you want to go a bit deeper. But yeah, it is a phenomenal movie in which, again, the cast are all on point. Back when this came out, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce weren't exactly household names. But yeah, they certainly show why they should be based on the evidence here. Just phenomenal work by everyone. And a brilliant screenplay from what should really be a book that is impossible to adapt. And yet Curtis Hanson managed it to great effect. And number 6 is The Sixth Sense. This, for me, is still the best movie from director M. Night Shyamalan. It is the film of his that hits me in the feels more than any. It is essentially the story of two characters. They both have a through line, really. They both have their own conclusion. But it is in the meeting of each other and the exploration of what they are going through with each other that ultimately leads them to their separate conclusions. Bruce Willis's character Malcolm, this psychiatrist, and his young patient Cole, this kid who sees dead people. The thing is, it's a quiet film. It's not, bells and whistles. It's not your modern horror. It's not full of like jump scares and flashy editing. It's not James Wan or anything like that. It's very sedate. It's a very slow moving. It breathes. It's very character driven. More than anything, it is a character driven piece. And yeah, because of that, I just get sucked in every time I watch it. Like I say this all the time when I talk about The Sixth Sense, but too much is made of that twist ending, as if that's, once you know the twist ending, that's it. There's no film. But the film is so much more than that twist ending because of the relationships in it, because of how these people affect each other's lives. And that's essentially what the film is about, how we treat each other, the knock-on effect we have when we interact with other people. For me, it's a very touching film. It's a very moving film. Number 5 is Good Will Hunting, a brilliant script from Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Phenomenally directed by Gus Van Sant, who, quite frankly, for me, this is his best film. I think Van Sant can, on more than one occasion, be guilty of a little pretension, a little pretentiousness. He's not my favourite filmmaker, is Gus Van Sant, it's got to be said. And I think the real stars of the show here are Damon and Affleck. Whether it's in their script or the performances that they give on screen. Robin Williams as well, giving one of a career-defining performance, I would say. When you think of the absolute best Robin Williams performances, this has to be in consideration for me. I mean, this is my favourite Williams performance. But the acting is top-notch. If you want to see a film just purely for acting, then this is literally just people sitting in rooms talking. If they don't emote, if they don't deliver with their A game, then this would be an incredibly dull movie. But thanks to the dialogue, thanks to those performances, this is just endlessly rewatchable and gripping and moving. Number 4 is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, one of the best sci-fi action movies ever made. Still Cameron's best movie. It's one that gets better and better every time I watch it. Of the 3 cuts that exist out there, I personally think the theatrical cut is the best. I just think it does what it does with a lot more efficiency. It doesn't get bogged down with certain scenes that I think ultimately, quite rightly, were cut. Interesting to see, interesting to watch, but I think the best version of the film ultimately got released in cinemas, which isn't often something I can say when it comes to director's cuts and things like that. But yeah, it is a movie about humanity, about fate, about fatherhood, in the same way that, or in a similar way that Cameron explored the theme of motherhood in Aliens. I think he explores the theme of fatherhood here. I mean, just parenthood in general, quite frankly, because, we do get Sarah Connor back. We do get the mother's perspective in this. But there is also a heavy dose of what it means to be a father. The fact that this Terminator, this machine, ends up being a better father figure than any of the would-be fathers that came and went in John Connor's life says a lot. It's maybe a ringing indictment of a lot of fathers that are out there, to be honest. But it's a great movie. There's got a lot to say that you don't have to take on board if you don't want to, because it's not ham-fistedly forced down your face. It's just there. If you want to read it, it's there. If you don't, you just want to see stuff blow up, enjoy the ride, because it's great on that front too. Number 3 is Dead Man Walking. I can't tell you how much I love this film. It's a quiet drama. There's not a right lot that happens. It's a woman going to different people and talking to them about faith, about life, about death, about forgiveness, redemption. It's all of that stuff, and it's very real, it's very human. It takes a look at things from multiple facets. It's never just, this we have to view it this one way and that's it. It's, just when you're starting to feel for the guy who's on death row, we speak to the families of the people that he murdered, and suddenly you realise, no, there's more than just this man's life at stake here. There's this family, they feel what they feel for good reason, and so it's a very nuanced look at death row. And as someone who is very much against the death penalty, I don't condone it in any way, shape or form. I think this movie it just does a phenomenal job of looking at the ins and outs, the whys and the wherefores, the shoulds or we shouldn't we's, and ultimately it's just a very human story about people who need redemption. Number 2 is Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson's absolute epic film, 3-hour drama that just assaults you with every facet of humanity. It's just so many different characters going through so many hardships and crisscrossing over at various points. And it's really just about, in the end, treating people better. Judge not lest you be judged, and treat those as you wish to be treated. That's really the philosophy that is at the heart of the film. Life is hard enough without adding to it by judging others and treating them in contrast to how you wish to be treated. So, the frogs. What's the frogs all about? It's a question often asked of the film. For me, it's simply an act of God breaking in at the darkest moment of all of these people's lives and reminding them that miracles happen, that there are things that go unexplained that can awaken us to the fact that there are things greater than us, forces greater than us, beyond our lives. For me, it's God breaking into the film, but that's just my own take on it. You can have your own. I just think it's a phenomenal film. Every time I watch it, I feel like I've had a workout in the best possible sense. But my number 1, my absolute favourite film of the 90s, at this point at any rate, sometimes because it's hard. Certainly this top 10, it's always hard to distinguish like which is really my absolute favourite. But for whatever reason, I always lean on this. Number one, it's The Truman Show. I love The Truman Show. I think it's brilliantly written. I think the concept alone is, it's just brilliantly conceived. So Andrew Niccol, who wrote and directed Gattaca, which also appeared on this list, he wrote the screenplay for this. Peter Weir directed it. And it's just a phenomenal story that, at the time when it came out, seemed a bit crazy and yet seems more believable by the day. As we view people's lives through the non-stop stream of, reality TV and YouTube and goodness knows what else. It was a very timely film, maybe just slightly ahead of its time, maybe, I don't know. But I just think it's commentary on modern society, on the world, on our need to look into people's lives, the consumerism, the selling of products by Truman's wife. It's all just really cleverly done. It's all just really cleverly handled. Jim Carrey gives a really excellent performance. I feel for this guy. I root for this guy. I warm to this guy. I like him as a human being. I like how The Truman Show explores notions of freedom and control. Underneath, there's actually quite a dark tale going on. This tale of suppression, of a man's freedom being taken and his life being controlled. That's all pretty dark stuff. It's clever. It's good stuff. It delivers its message in a way that it's smart, that reels you in, that makes you care, and like I say, masterpiece. But there you go. That is my top 100 movies of the 90s. My question to you is, what's yours? I mean, feel free to have at it and give me your actual top 100. I realise that's quite a task. Not everybody likes to do that or feels that they can. But let me know what some of your favourites are. Give me your top 10 of the 90s. Let me know what you think of my top 10 or my top 100 overall. What's some of my choices that definitely should not be on here? Where have I gone wrong? What am I missing? What movies were you hoping were going to be on this list but weren't? Let me know down in the comments section your thoughts on my thoughts. And thank you for watching this video. And until next time, cracking.